Hello there, and I'm very glad you could join me again. This Sands of the Forest has been in our probably trembling hands for a little under a week now, and I think by now most of us have got to grips with most of the game's mechanics. Unless of course you're like me, in which case you'll probably be fumbling around like a complete moron, not having any clue what to do. Which, if I'm being honest, is probably me even on a good day. Anyway, with that being said, I think most of us by now have a pretty good idea of some of the changes we'd like to see being made to the game going forward. So I thought now would be a perfect time to discuss what some of those changes might be. Quick disclaimer before we move on, there is a major update coming within the next few days, so some of these suggestions and ideas might already be implemented by then or replaced by something better entirely. So please don't yell at me. No, please, really don't. I'm very sensitive. I've prepared a list of 5 different things that I'd like to see being changed or added in the game, but if you have any different ideas or suggestions, then I'd definitely like to hear from you in the comments. Without any further ado, let's get started on this list, shall we? Starting with number 1. Please, 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 for the love of God, can we have bigger storage options for our logs? Because whoever thought that having a maximum storage capacity of 6 logs should honestly be hurled onto the island, abandoned, and fed to the cannibals themselves, because it sucks. Okay, so maybe I'm being a little bit over dramatic, but it kind of does defeat the purpose of having log storage at all when you really go through so many logs. 6 is a pretty insignificant number in the grand scheme of things, I think. It would also be nice to have maybe different options available, like small log storage, large storage, extra large storage, and also the ability to be able to stack maybe 2 or 3 of those on top of each other to save some space would be a nice thing to have as well, I think. But out of all the things on this list, I think this one's the most likely to be added in the next update, so fingers crossed, because it would really be a pretty big quality of life improvement, I'd say. Now we move on to number 2. The food and cooking system in the game is sadly kind of lacking. It feels rudimentary at best. Let me give you a brief example. Being able to eat raw meat without any penalties. We all know raw meat is generally pretty bad for your health, especially if you're eating it from wild animals. There could be fatal diseases on it, bacteria, all sorts of nasties. But the fact that there isn't any penalty at all is a little bit puzzling, really. It is, after all, a fairly basic thing that you'd expect to be in a hardcore survival game like Sands of the Forest. Another example I could give is that raw fish, for some reason, gives you the biggest health increase you can get from any of the foods you eat, I believe. And that doesn't really make much sense to me, if I'm being honest. I know you can eat raw fish in real life, but why does it give you such a big health increase? It seems more of an oversight in my opinion, so hopefully that's something that will be changed in the not too distant future. Now, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with the food and cooking system. It works just fine, but I think something that could be added that would improve it would be the addition of recipes to make stews, soups, and breads and other things like that, which would not only really restore your health, but maybe give you additional little perks as well over eating a basic piece of meat that you might grab from a deer or something like that. For example, eating a stew might increase your stamina for a while, or increase your strength. There's lots of little things like that that could be done to make it a much more immersive and enjoyable system to use. Being on the topic of food for now, another kind of nitpicky thing I found out is that MREs and other packaged food like that, it seems to be a little bit too plentiful and easy to find. I think those kind of items should be in like one of the unguarded underground storage bunkers or something like that. It should be more likely to spawn there than just in general loot boxes and things. And that kind of leads me on perfectly to number 3, loot rarity. What do I mean by loot rarity? Well, like I just touched on, certain items like packaged food, MREs, ammo, grenades seem too readily available and pretty easy to find. If you roam around the map enough, you can find them in boxes or in camps and just laying around on the beach, which is fine, but I don't think it's especially realistic. Those are items that you'd want to keep under lock and key for the most part, I would have thought. So I think more valuable items like that should be kept in the underground bunkers, I would say, and be a lot more difficult to find than they actually are. A pretty simple suggestion really, but I think it's still important to mention. And now moving on to number 4. I think it'd be pretty cool to have more options for decorating your base and functional furniture options as well. Because it's a little bit limited at the moment, especially if you're building a bigger base. I don't think the stick bed is going to fit in every build. Same with the current log doors. I think they look a little bit silly, especially on the bigger builds again. And maybe having some other options like hammocks, leaf beds, and other cool decorative stuff would certainly be a welcome addition. I would say it's not a big suggestion, but again, I think it would be cool to have. And now we move on to the last item on the list. I guess this one might be a little on the controversial side, but hear me out, I think most of you will probably agree with me in the end. Now don't get me wrong, the current AI is actually one of the best I've ever seen in a video game, but I think it still needs a few tweaks. And more specifically, I'm talking about their aggression and how they react to certain things you do, like say you kill a whole raiding party of cannibals and display their bones on racks and whatever. You would think that logically they would probably want to avoid you for a little while, but instead they keep sending more and more cannibals to their deaths, when realistically they'd probably want to regroup and maybe come up with some different tactics, instead of doing the same thing over and over again, which obviously isn't working. And that leads me on to another problem that I think the relentless aggression of the AI seems to cause for players, mostly because of how short the day-night cycle is. But I think the frequency of the attacks on your base need to be toned down a little bit. I believe they happen around once a day or so. I could be wrong, but I think that's not really enough time to rebuild, repair, and resupply before the next attack again. So I think players do need a little bit of time to breathe and progress with their story a little bit if they want to, without constantly having to repair their base. I know some players have completely turned off building to damage because of that. So yeah, it's not ideal, but I'm glad there is at least some settings there for players who are having a little bit of trouble with it. It's better than nothing, I suppose. But anyway, that was my list of 5 changes I'd like to see in Sons of the Forest. Do you agree with them, or do you disagree? Do you have your own suggestions? I'd be very interested in hearing from you down in the comments below. I see that you made it this far into the video, so I've one small, tiny little favour to ask of you. You see that little red button down below that says subscribe? I'd be really grateful if you'd press it, and the like button next to it as well. It would really help my channel grow and help my content reach more people, so I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you all very soon.